Transcripts and recordings of the podcast may not be used for any purpose without the direct written permission of the podcast owner. Welcome to LITE It Up, a podcast about resilient women balancing motherhood, their careers, personal lives, and all of the challenges that come along with being a superwoman. Each week, you'll be motivated to take action to lead, inspire, transform, and empower. Now, here's your host, Dr. Aginah M. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of LITE It Up. I am your host, Dr. Aginah M. I'm so excited that you can join me for another episode in season 6 of the podcast. I have a very special guest this week, someone who is a dear friend of mine. We go back, I think, about 20 plus years or so.
Long time.
Very long time. My dear friend Latisha Howze is today's guest on LITE It Up. Our relationship dates back to when we worked together at Chicago Public Schools. And now Latisha, she's an adjunct professor. She's an early childhood education guru and administrator. She does educational consulting. I'll let her talk about herself, which she probably won't want to do. But I have her here today because we are going to tackle a topic that I don't think I've ever publicly talked about before. And I couldn't think of a better person to engage in this conversation about type A personality moms and our role of parenting our children, in particular, our sons. We'll touch on some other topics too about parenting, but welcome to LITE It Up. Tish, how are you?
Thank you, Aginah. Thank you for having me. We finally synced our schedules to make this happen, so I'm excited.
Yes.
To be participating, and just as you said, as the quick introduction, you're right, I don't like talking about myself. It feels so awkward, but nevertheless, in this profession, I'm often required to introduce myself. So again, my name is Latisha Howze, and I am most notably an early childhood education consultant. And so what that means is I have like 10 different jobs dealing with early childhood education, which has been a labor of love of mine for over 20 years. And so as a consultant right now, what I do is go throughout the United States and monitor programs for quality early childhood services and compliance with federal regulations. And so that's kind of a mouthful. I won't dissect that, but, basically monitoring for quality in early childhood education. And then also I work as I serve as a technical assistant, technical training and assistance consultant. So I'm working with, organizations that have early childhood programs and training their teaching staff, as well as working alongside as of the CEOs or the directors as sort of a thought partner and just helping to move their programs towards quality or quality improvement. Again, that's a mouthful, but that's it in a nutshell.
And I'm just curious to know, how did you enter into this space, the field of early childhood education? Because when you and I met, we worked in the CEO's office of Chicago Public Schools.
We did.
Yeah,
we did.
Were the young ones running the 5th floor.
Yeah, we did. Thought we were the stuff. But if you recall, while I was working in the CEO's office, I was actually a intern. I was an intern, and then I ultimately got a full-time position, but all the while I was in school for early childhood education. So I was attending school, Roosevelt University at the time. So I would leave the CEO's office and walk over to Roosevelt University downtown in the Loop. And so my aspiration had always been in early childhood education. And so, that just was the channel that opened up doors of opportunity for me to continue to down that path. And so after I left the CEO's office, I wound up in the Office of Early Childhood Education for Chicago Public Schools and stayed there forever until, I knew it was time to move on.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And that in and of itself, to make that decision to leap out, just on faith too, because you made the decision to become a consultant, because you knew that you had the skills and training. If you could, work for CPS, you could work for yourself. So I certainly admire you for that, because a lot of people unfortunately operate on fear or the unknown, and you have been able to just do phenomenally in your role as a consultant. So I commend you for having the belief in yourself and your abilities. So I now want to kind of transition into your mom of 3, married, you have 2 sons, a daughter, and you have a type A personality. No, seriously. Why don't we talk about, because this is something that I don't think most people really talk about, parenting, how they parent. A lot of times we as mothers are either looking at someone else and how they parent their child and think that sometimes somebody else may be doing a better job or may not be experiencing the same challenges that we are. And so, as a result, we may not often talk about some of our experiences as openly, especially if we're struggling in certain areas.
Right.
So your children, your son he's in his 20s, right? How old are you?
Yeah, actually my oldest son, and I have to just pinch myself because I can't believe the time has flown by so quickly, but he's 28.
Okay.
And then, so they're well spaced apart. And then my daughter is 21, and then I have a 10-year-old. So they're 7 and 11 years apart. So I rolled the dice on those.
You sure did. And had to start all over each time.
Started all over each time. So they have a level of entitlement all on their own that, maybe we'll discuss at some point.
So with your children being that far apart in age, how would you say that as you look back on your parenting, how has your parenting evolved from your 28-year-old to now your 10-year-old?
That's a great question. I believe that I would like to say my parenting skills have evolved or matured, I should say. And with my 28-year-old, I was still when he was born, I was only 20. So we did a lot of growing together, and so a lot of things that I did with him was really trial and error. And then at being 20, you kind of give yourself, I think, a little. I don't want to say that I was carefree, but I gave myself a little bit more grace to make mistakes. Where I think with my middle child, my daughter, I was into my profession. So I was trying to do everything the right way. I knew what the book said about raising, early childhood education. I knew, the theory behind raising a good child, starting with, early childhood education as that sort of platform for them to develop, and just really all of that book nonsense and stuff. So I don't want to say nonsense, the book stuff.
Right, right.
Now with Mason, who is 10, I say I'm a lot more mature, because now I give myself a level of grace where I know with my daughter, who's who's next in line to him, is I just give myself a little bit more grace to make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
and understand that it's not the end of the world. I think my daughter probably got it the hardest because, again, she was almost like my little experiment. I had learned so much and was trying to apply what I had learned, in raising her. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just, each child was different. Each child, my parenting style was very different. A lot of growing with my oldest, a lot of experimenting with my second, and then giving myself a little bit of grace with this last one.
Okay.
And then I'm not a lot older too, so.
Do you think also, what factor do you think gender plays into the parenting? Because I will say, and for me, I have 3 children, but I have 2 girls and a son. I mean, the caveat is that I have twins. So
Yeah.
Aaliyah's like the middle child, though she isn't. But what I hear from them is that I play favoritism towards my son, and I'm harder on them because they're girls, or they'll make comments like, well, you know how you mothers are when it comes to your son. Do you think that with the fact that Micah was the middle child, then she's a girl, and you're trying to apply like all of this knowledge that you've learned over the course of the years from your son, your oldest son, do you think your parenting technique also differed because she was a girl?
I would say yes. And I'm going to say this. There's an old adage that says that mothers raise their daughters and they love their sons.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that we don't love our daughters.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely understand what that meant, and I learned that early on, thankfully, because it allowed me to correct some of the things that I do, I was doing as I was parenting, that probably lent some truth to that adage.
Mm-hmm.
So when we say that, I think that the fact, one, that I'm a woman and I was a girl, so I understand some of the challenges that I understood some of the challenges at the time my daughter would face growing up, or that I believe she would experience growing up, and even as an adult, and ultimately, hopefully raising her own family and, mothering her own children and parenting her own children. So a lot of that was trying to prepare her, wrong or right, trying to prepare her for what I felt was to come,
Mm-hmm.
as a female, as a young lady, as a girl, as a woman adult,
Mm-hmm.
so just trying to prepare her. And that's the major difference, that I had to be intentional about making sure that I did not enforce my beliefs about what girls and ultimately women might experience, because it doesn't have to be her truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to be intentional about thinking about that, because, again, I learned that early enough on, where now, I had the knowledge to change that if I wanted to kind of shape that trajectory. And so I was intentional about, maybe a little later than I had intended, but around, 10, 11, 12, I learned to just, give her, you make sure I was nurturing her, make sure I gave her the hugs and the love that, she needed to be shown. Because even though we love our sons and raise our daughters, we do love our daughters as well. It's just that I think that we raise them differently because we empathize and understand a little bit more about being of the female gender.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's a very good point because, as I'm thinking about my own daughters, there's so much of them. I see myself in them, like when I was their age. And a lot of times I'm thinking about, well, what would I have wanted my mother to do in this situation? A lot of times when we're parenting, when we're raising our children, we're either going to raise them in a way that we probably wanted to be raised, or or take the bits and pieces that we probably appreciated and valued from the way our parents raised us. At least um, that's been my approach. But I've also been told that it's a lot of pressure being my child because of the expectations that I have. And I know that you and I have had this conversation as well, because you too have expectations of your children. So how do you think that has played a role in your level of expectations? Do you ever think at any point that while your goal was to raise children who are confident and successful and excel in whatever it is that they attempt to achieve, do you think at any point that you've applied too much pressure on them, or it's backfired in any type of way, or had any type of negative impact, I guess?
Aginah, yes, I do. To answer your question, yes, sometimes I do believe that it backfired or had an adverse effect than I had originally intended. Being, type A, it is challenging raising children, especially if they're a little bit more mellow than you. Children are already, they don't move as quickly as we would like them to. They don't always follow through when we think they should already. So, my daughter is very mellow, and I think that ultimately she will, I see some of her type A characteristics coming out as she gets older, but she's a lot more mellow than I am. So, my expectations for her was that she, move faster, that she, not waste time, and, and not really taking into consideration, as we're speaking about girls, not even taking into consideration some of the things that she may have been dealing with. I just felt that, because I was always forward leaning and, always trying to achieve the next thing. I kind of rub some of that off, I think, or push some of that off on her, those ideals off on her. And it just was not even taking into consideration that, she was coming into her own self. She was maturing into a young adult, and all of those challenges that came along with it. I could clearly recall saying to her, you don't get a pass you don't get a pass on not getting good grades, because I did this. I went to school while I was working a full-time job, raising children and all these other things, and always comparing myself to her. And then she finally said, Mom, I'm not you. And she was absolutely right. She's not me. And so I had to really take a step back and be thoughtful about, what is it that I am pushing her towards, and really just having to take that close look at how, I guess, how I was pushing my own sort of ideals about where she should be in life on her. And she was already struggling with some other things. She was, just had left an HBCU and had to, and started attending a predominantly white university. And that was a challenge and a change in itself, during the height of COVID. And so it was already a challenging time for young adults. And I just was not really taking those things into consideration, I think, like I should have. And so ultimately it had an adverse effect on her, onto her mental state, and not to the point that it drove her over the edge or anything, because she's doing quite well now. But I just had to take a step back and let her breathe and really kind of say, Tish, you cannot enforce, you can't enforce where you feel she should be on her at this point.
Mm-hmm.
With my son, I'm gonna just change gears a little bit here, because it was quite different. So for my son, who's 28, I think the adverse effect with really being type A and really, I would say, just really wanting him to be wanting him to be doing much more than what he was doing at the time of his early 20s. And I think he felt that. And so ultimately it came to a point where every time I would call him or he would call me, it would be about, he would start to say, Mom, I'm working on some stocks now. I'm in this investment club, or Mom, I'm enrolling in these classes and I'm doing this, because what I wanted him to do was go to college and graduate and make something, of himself. That was what in my mind, I wanted him to do, just on a straight and narrow, do the right thing, go to college, graduate. And then, ultimately I realized that was not where he was strong at. College was not something, he struggled in college. Mm-hmm. He got through a good 2.5 years and then just kind of fizzled out from there. Nothing that we did to try to get him back on task helped. Mm-hmm. And then we ultimately realized that, that wasn't his thing, that college was not for him. The traditional college route was not for him. And it was, it was a very sobering moment when we realized that. But he, I felt that the things that my personality and just pushing that off on him really caused him to just say, no more, I just can't do it, and just really shut down. Mm-hmm. And then get to the point that he was making up stuff to tell me positive things about what he was doing. And then I had to ultimately say, I recognize you're making some things up, because you're not doing all of this. You may be doing some of this, but you're not doing all of this, but you're trying to appease me because you think that this is what I want to hear about you. And I realized I had to say to him, son, I'm proud of you. You could be a whole lot of other things, but I'm proud of you. And now he's doing quite well for himself. He's found his niche, and it's not college. He's taking courses for computer tech. Mm-hmm. And he's doing what he wants to do. He moved to a nice part of Texas, and he is just forging his own way. And I couldn't be more proud of him. But I had to take, like I said, a very sobering look at my parenting skills and how, it ultimately impacted him. And so that went for both of my children. So while there's some ownership, and we talked about this before, Gina, while they have some ownership about of their destiny and what, holding up their end of the bargain, if you will, I also have to take ownership in the fact that, I this type A personality sometimes can push kids too far. Yeah. And, so it was just a wake-up call for me, mm-hmm. as well as them.
And you know what, I think one thing that I can say, because I'm at the beginning stages of having children in college. And I know one of the things that I did probably throughout like high school was ask them, do you want to go to college, or are you just planning to go to college because that's what you think I want you to do? Is it because I work, in higher ed? Like, I tried to create a space and open up the conversation and have dialogue, mm-hmm. because I told them, you tell me now so that I'll know which direction I need to help you go in and how I need to invest in you. And hopefully they're honest. They've been honest. I hope.
I got, and I hope so too. And I got to commend you on that, because that was never an option I gave to my two oldest. Now for Mason, he'll get that option, because now I know better. You know better, you do better.
Right.
But that wasn't an option. It was just like, come on, let's get these applications in. Let's try to apply for these scholarships. You know, my son, when he went away, he had scholarships for sports, because he was like All-American in high school. So he played every sport. And so he had scholarships that he wound up losing, just everything, because the academic prowess was not, was not there. You know, it was there in the beginning. And I think he even struggled with that, but he's such a charmer, and he knows, you know, he has a way with people, and, you know, he did get a lot of support. And so he kind of muddled through. He did good his first year, then the second year kind of got a little bit, you know, as it gets increasingly more difficult, he kind of, you could just see him going downhill in academics, and then just focusing on his social life, which he's very very likable person, let me say that. And so he wound up pledging in the fraternity, and, you know, really just, I always say, you just shimmied yourself right on out of college. We laugh about it now, because like I said, we realized some things about the both of us. And I think that he always would say, Mom, I think I have undiagnosed ADHD. And I said, well, if you feel even in adulthood that you have it, and if we didn't get it diagnosed or whatever, you can go get evaluated. He said, no, he said, it's working. So he said it's working on his behalf in his current job role. So I said, okay, well, if you feel it's working, so, you know, do what works best for you. So like I said, I think he's kind of found some leverage and found his niche in the work that he's doing to make it work for him. And he's doing well in his own right. You know, he's doing what he wants to do. He's happy. And like I said, he's on his own. So.
Yeah. Well, that's good that you all were able to come to a resolution, I guess, to, and an understanding that your path is not the path that is designed for me, but he's been able, to create his own way that works for him. One of the things, as you were talking, just made me think about my son, because I recall asking him, do you feel any pressure to, in terms of grades or just excelling and doing well? And he said yes. Now, he is the child who is completely straightforward and honest, but the manner in which he, communicates his feelings, it's a little bit different from his sisters. And so we can have those conversations. I think with Aaliyah, it's totally different, because she is she maps out, like she's a planner. Like I can see firsthand different tips that I give to all of them. She takes it and she applies it, and it works, to her favor. My son's very laid back, doesn't like confrontation, at all. He thinks challenging a professor about a grade is being confrontational. I don't. I'm like, it's the manner in which you approach the situation. But I will say, I think that, and I'm grateful for this, I think one thing that has, I feel like has worked in my benefit is because I work in higher ed, I see those students who attend an institution that they didn't select, but they attend the institution because either they got a scholarship, their parents wanted them to go there, but it just was not the right fit for them. And so even with my consulting with parents now, there are tons of parents who are going through this college application process and I'm still waiting for decisions and financial aid package, to become available. But I tell them, look, you need to sit down and have a real conversation with your child
that
about
part
what it is What is it that they want to do? Why are they going to college? Where do they see themselves? Even if they haven't completely like mapped it out, because you don't want them to go away to school or go to college, spend years and money that you can't get back. And nine times out of 10, it's going to be your money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Spending.
Oh, yes.
You certainly don't want them to go into student loan debt like we did,
right,
to get a degree, and that's not something that they want to do. So I think having those real conversations is important, but I also believe, like with our generation, I was saying this to you before we, started recording, that our generation has created an entire generation of entitled people. And it's because we wanted the best for our children. And so we were trying to give them everything, put them in every activity you could think of to make sure they're well-rounded, make sure they have all of these experiences. And now what you have are, young adults who have this expectation that they're supposed to get whatever it is that they want.
Yes.
I think they're missing the grit, being able to sacrifice or knowing what sacrifice is.
Yeah, I agree.
And so in our quest to give our children more than what we have, or give them a better life than what we thought that we had, now we have like this, I don't want to call it a mess, but it's almost like an imperfect, perfect mess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen, what the end result is going to be.
I know. Yeah. We have, and it is a sense of entitlement, but I think that, when we're intentional about realizing that, and this is a vulnerable space to admit that we have some parenting flaws, right? Yeah, sometimes absolutely. It's like, and it is, for me, it's challenging. Even just talking through this, I'm hearing myself like, man, really? Even though I thought I knew everything about my parenting style, and even where, my mishaps and things like that, it's still a vulnerable space to say, I messed up. I felt I messed up. But then you have to, again, giving yourself some grace to say that there's no playbook. There was never a playbook. So you just do the best that you can. And so with that being said, even with wanting our children to have more, I think the one of the things that we have to be intentional about is about balancing it out. So with to the extent possible, let me say that with my 10-year-old, I'm trying to be intentional and not be tired, because I'm an older mom now, about saying, no, okay, if you want some toys or you want this, you got to earn it. You got to go out there and rake some leaves or wash mommy's car or whatever it is, and just balancing it out. Because again, that whole thing about knowing better, you do better. Right. And because my children are so spaced apart, I can kind of see, now what the results of giving things are. Because my daughter, she's the ultimate prima donna. She wants everything handed to her. So sometimes I have to say, look, child, you're 21. Remember, you're 21 now. So really, and really and truly, you're grown. I've done my part, but just jokingly, because I would never just leave her out there. But with my 10-year-old, Aginah, I'm so intentional about making sure that, even though he gets a lot, I bend over backwards to make sure he has a comfortable life, and that if I am experiencing anything, he doesn't. I try to shield him from that as well as his dad, and but just balancing it out and being honest with him at times about when things are difficult, or when we don't always get what we want, and just really working and then giving back and reminding him how fortunate he is and blessed that he is to have a roof over his head. So I had him writing, he's like, why am I writing this? I had him writing like an essay on Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday the other day, the holiday. And I said, I don't just want this to be a one-time thing just because it's the holiday. So I had him write something yesterday about being a Black boy. And he was like, And I said, I want to do more of that because, just opening his eyes to the real world. Because if not, we're creating an illusion. If we give them everything, they'll go into the world thinking that things will be handed to them. And we both know, especially with our kids being children, kids of color, that that's not going to happen.
Exactly.
So I think that fine balance is so important, and just trying to remember and remind ourselves how important it is as we give them. I'm not gonna say not to give them the things that they want, especially if they've earned it or they do well, but just balancing it out is important. And
So,
I don't know if that's the key or not, but that's what I'm doing with this 10-year-old of mine.
well, look, there, like you said, there's no playbook. And that's the thing. I mean, parenting is about trial and error. And each child is different. So what works on one child is not going to work on
Another,
the
yeah,
other. As
yeah.
I'm certainly learning that right now, that
Yeah.
it's not, it's not the same because they have different personalities. And I remember I used to talk about, just in terms of like my parents, and I would say that my parents play favoritism towards my older brother. And I remember they would say, I love, not that they loved us equally, but they loved us adequately, or something based upon how we needed to be loved. And I'm like, whatever. But I even kind of find myself in some ways there, I do display, I think, probably my love a little bit differently to each one of them based upon the way I think that they need it, or, and that's also something that there is the 5 love languages. Now we do that for relationships, but I don't know how many of us do that, in terms of with our children, because people do view love differently. I know even for myself, I will talk about needing help, or needing someone to help me in the way that I need them to help me, not in the way that they want to help me or choose to help me. So it's almost the same way of telling somebody how you need to be loved, or how you, receive love. And not that I don't think, not trying to make everything textbook, but sometimes those books help, in terms of helping us realize some things of, about ourselves.
Yeah, that was a well-written, I think that book, the 5, what is the 5 love languages? Yeah. I think that was just spot on as far as relationships go. And now you just said something very poignant. And I think that just applying that same concept to how we love our children is important, because they're, again, if they're individual people and we know that they have individual personalities, we have to figure out their love language. So, and be able to show them love in that way. So it's equally, I think, as important as it is with your spouse or your significant other, to find out what their love language is, and just, approach how you love them in the way that it's more receptive to them. Because if we're loving them and we're loving them wrong and they don't perceive it, and I have experienced that, where I felt I was pouring in and loving on one of my children. I won't, say which one, but and that child felt that, no, that wasn't you. I didn't see it as, I didn't receive that as you loving me. I felt that as you, that you were controlling me. And I was like, wow, it wasn't working with her, but it worked with,
Well, see, now we know who you're talking about.
I was gonna mess up with that child.
It's always those girls, always those girls.
Right.
Speaking of, so here's something that often comes up, I think, in conversation, and in terms of raising girls and boys. Now I'm a firm believer that, well, you know, my situation, I mean, divorce. So I'm raising, or I have raised, a son, and two daughters, but I don't believe, that I think it's very important for a young, young man to have a male father figure, you know, in his life, because as a woman, as a mother, I can't teach my son how to be a man. I just don't believe that I can do that. But I feel like giving him, just some essential tools, you know, about being a decent, respectful, you know, young man. If anything, certainly how to treat a young lady. So I believe I've done a pretty good job with that, because sometimes I have to catch myself, and he even has to kind of pull me by my coattail when he's telling me about some of the things that he's doing for a young lady. And I'm like, well, can't she such and such and such and such? He's like, Ma, no, like,
Yeah.
I have to pick her up, you know, I'm not going to be riding on the passenger seat of her. So then I have to stop and think, okay, you have done in that regard. At least I know my son is not going to be out here, you know, using a young lady or anything like that. But what are your thoughts about, or I guess, what type of advice can you give moms who have boys that they're raising, and you know, they have this type A personality? Because here's the other thing with being women with type A personalities, we can also cause harm in terms of our young men being silent in terms of voicing their opinion. You know what I mean? Just because of maybe the way we may communicate or we may respond to things. In some ways, that could also cause them to be maybe passive in some ways. You know what I mean?
I would start, Aginah, by saying, you know, I know, I get what you're saying about it's you struggle with maybe the belief that women can't raise a man, but and I don't know if that's the word, the phrase that you said, but I know, I feel and I believe that women can raise men. What they can't do is model masculinity necessarily, but they can put those people in the lives of of their sons that to help them with that modeling masculinity. But to raising your son to be respectful of women, clearly you've done that, because for him to say, look, I need to, at some point he recognizes that that's important, to treat a lady or treat a young lady with respect. There's a lot of information and books coming out about raising a feminist feminist son. At first, you know, I was like, I don't know about a feminist son, and I had to realize they're not saying a feminine son, but a feminist son, one who is aware of, you know, aware of women as you know, who they are, and who they can be, and not, you know, being a what is the word I'm looking for?
Chauvinist?
A chauvinist or a misogynist, or you know, that type of person.
Right.
And so I think, again, just, you know, there's a lot coming out about that. And I just really have been reading up on that. Was still raising a son. And even though his dad is, you know, involved in his life, I still know that he gravitates towards me as mom. You know, I think he just favors mom. I mean, I don't understand, but he loves being with me. I'm the fun person. I'm the fun, I think, parent for him. But nevertheless, I have to be careful about the things that I say, and, you know, and around him, and and making sure that he understands, hold the door for mom. I tell him, oh, open the door for me. I'm not gonna open that door if I'm walking with you, and things like that. And not that I can, and not that, but those are things that are important to me. And I think as a young man, I think that those are values that he should carry with him. So but as far as my advice, again, I told you what my experience, and I was very vulnerable and open and saying that, there were some things I know I did wrong with my oldest son, and that he felt that every time we talked that he had to tell me about all of these lofty goals and achievements that he was, working on, and, and things that he was doing. And I had to take a step back because I missed just being his mom. I missed him talking to me about if he was sad, or if this girl didn't like him or didn't call back or didn't respond. And then and I had to be intentional about saying, look, son, I want you just, I don't want you to feel that every time I call you or you call me, it is to talk about your achievements or accomplishments, or I just want you to tell me about how your day is going. And every day is not going to be a good day. So I already know that. So don't call me every day saying I'm just having a great, great day and I've done this and done that, and then I still see you don't have enough to show for it. And so I had to just stop them and just say, I just want you some time just to tell me. I want you to talk to me about everything, that you feel comfortable with. Well, not everything, but, some of your trials and errors, some of your missteps, some of your shortcomings, some of your, the things that you planned that did not go how you planned, I want you to talk about those are very important milestones and things too, but, I just want you to keep it real. Like they say, they used to say, keep it 100, with mom. And he did. And now, he's 28. And this was happened years ago, as he was like early 20s, maybe up to even 24 or 5 or something like that. But as he matured and, and got older and is getting older, we talk every day. And I mean, Aginah, we talk about everything, just about. Sometimes I have to say, oh, I don't need to hear about her.
Yeah.
But he's almost like, I've allowed him to be my friend. We're friends now, which we weren't. How we say, I'm not your little friend back in the day. He wasn't my little friend back then, but now I say, he's my son and he respects me as his mom. But now I can say that we're like friends. We're friends, and I know some people say, oh no, well, my children will never be their friend. Well, I'm sorry for you, because it's a beautiful thing. Because my son we talk about everything, and we talk for hours, just like you and I talk. When we talk for hours, and it's just a beautiful thing to me. But I had to really just take, like I said, that I keep saying, that step back from enforcing what I felt was important, and that I felt that he should achieve and accomplish, and say, I'm just proud of who you are. I'm proud of what you're not, because he could have been he could have been way worse than what he is now. And he's living his life, and he is enjoying himself. And that's what I've always wanted for my children. I want them to be happy. I want them to be successful too, but I want them to be happy.
Right.
And I see that.
That's good. And I think it's great that you pointed out also, because you're right. We do have the tendency, I think we were all raised where our parents said, I'm not one of your little friends. And we probably have incorporated that in our own conversations with our children. But I too can see how our relationship has evolved. And I'm actually looking forward to when they get a little bit older, because right now I'm in the mode of kind of like an advisor, counselor for the two who are away at school. And that's working, because what I had to realize or trust that I instilled all that I could in the time that I had them here for those, 18 years that they were under my roof, that now that they're, somewhat on their own, because they're not grown. I do tell them, like, when I hear I'm 18, I'm grown. Yeah, but you can't take care of yourself completely. But I do trust that they're gonna, even when they make decisions that aren't the best, I have witnessed that they've been, I think, mature enough to even say, like, I messed up.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you told me, and I did exactly what you said I was
Mm-hmm.
going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
learned my lesson. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
if you learn a lesson and you have been granted an opportunity for another chance, you know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we can get a lesson that we're unable to recover from.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I had to also,
So true.
change how my responses are, when my children are telling me certain things, to make sure that they are comfortable with sharing more. Because
Mm-hmm.
one thing, I don't think any parent wants to experience is we know that someone's going to always know your child in a different light than you know them, just like,
Yes.
with us. Our children
Mm-hmm.
know us as mom, but our
Mm-hmm.
friends know us,
Mm-hmm.
as something else. But you still want to know, or be secure in the fact that you at least know your child,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that they're not that far off, or you guys aren't that far apart where you don't at least have a good, understanding of who they are and decisions that
Yes.
they would make.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, well, I appreciate you, sharing, because I know it's not always easy for us.
It's not, but it's needed and it's important. I think it's important for other folks to hear, it's okay. I mean, not to have all the answers, and and still your child will turn out just fine,
Yeah,
and maybe not what you intended for them to be, but their best version of themselves,
right.
and I
And
think that's equally important.
and I know I can say, I'm gonna say you have been helpful to me
Oh.
because woo, child.
We're helpful to each other. So likewise, I think I got my children have some years on yours, so I can tell you like, oh
Right.
God, I remember, and
Yes.
this is how I handle it, and this backfired, and this did, this
Yeah.
worked, so yeah,
But I think that's what's needed, because
Mm-hmm.
we don't open up, we don't share, or sometimes
Right.
we're sitting on the sidelines judging, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
really know
Mm-hmm.
what's going on behind closed
Mm-hmm.
doors, or you have one perception when really, hell, the person could be struggling just like you are
Mm-hmm.
in terms of
Mm-hmm. And I
navigating.
find that's the case more often than not. They're just waiting on
Exactly.
someone else to open up about it.
Exactly. E- Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'll just say this to those of you who are tuning in, all you moms and dads too. It's okay to talk to other parents and get parenting tips and
Mm-hmm.
share,
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, I think it will only help us become better parents, better individuals, and be better for our children. So
Yeah. Yes, I definitely agree. I wholeheartedly agree.
well, I want you to, I don't know, I'm not going to tell people how long it took for you to come on here. So the next time, the next time you
Don't
come
do me
back,
like that.
I know. The next time you come back, I do want us to talk about professionally, because like I said, you are an early childhood education guru. So I'd like for you to have an opportunity, to share some information with our listeners, because we do have listeners and viewers who are parents of little ones. That's not my ministry any longer. I'm counting down.
I would be glad to. I don't have all the answers, but I've been around the block a few times in that area. So yeah, I definitely would love to come back and talk about, what I know and just my experiences as well.
All right. Well, I am looking forward to it. Thank you so much for joining me this week. And for those of you in the viewing and listening audience, Thank you again for continuing to rock with me on Light It Up. I certainly appreciate it. Make sure that you subscribe to Light It Up podcast if you have not already done so. We're on all streaming platforms. That is iHeartRadio, Spotify, as well as Apple Podcasts. And for you Android users, yes, we're on Google Play too. You can also check out the Light It Up YouTube channel and Facebook page. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow, and share with a friend. So until next time, please remember to continue to light it up and shine bright like a diamond. Thanks for joining me this week on Light It Up. Make sure you visit my website at www.lightituppodcast.com or www.aginahmuhammad.com. You can also find me on social media using the handle @LightItUpPodcasts. If you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or you can simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time, light it up and shine bright like a diamond.